Welcome to 2 Cents Worth. I am your host, Ryan DeFaber. Today, we are going to be talking about being constantly curious. And what I mean by that is, think about if you have kids or when you were a kid, Curious George, right? The child book of the monkey, the man with the yellow hat, and how he always would get himself in trouble because he was curious. He was interested in wondering what things would come out of his actions, right? So on today's episode, we are going to be talking about being constantly curious. I consider myself someone in that category. I consider my children two people in that category. A lot of people that I know, people that work, my wife, always say that I know a little about a lot of things. I know useless facts. I know important facts. I know a little about a lot. And then I know a lot about a little. How about that? But I know a little about a lot of things because I am constantly curious. You know, Google might be the death of me, but when something comes up or I see something or I want to get a better understanding of something, I look it up. And more often than not, in the world we live in today, it's Google. My children constantly asking questions. Sometimes it's a great thing, and I try and not get frustrated with it. There are other times where I'm getting questions, in particular my oldest son, Nolan, he'll ask me questions about, Dad, who won the 1965 World Series? Or right now he's big into soccer. So it's like, Dad, how many Champions Leagues has Manchester United won? And when was the last time? And who was on the team? And do you know this? And do you know that? And I'm like, buddy, I love the fact that you are soaking up knowledge, but there are times where I'm like, 1,000 questions drive me crazy because it's like, I consider myself smart and I appreciate that my child looks at me in that light. At the same time, it's like, buddy, you got to stop asking me some of these questions. I have no idea. So, anyways, we'll get into that, but I think it's extremely important to be curious. I think it's important in all aspects of life for you to educate yourself and to grow as an individual, as a friend, as a family member, as a husband, as a father, mother, brother, sister. And I bring up family and relationships and things like that because I think it's also important to be constantly curious in regards to, for instance, let's say a marriage, right? So for me, I've been married 14 years, happily married for 14 years, but we as individuals are still growing together. And I think it's important for you to communicate. And when I say constantly curious, communication is part of that. It's a big part of that. Asking your spouse questions, letting your spouse ask you questions about certain things, about yourself, about how you're feeling, about what do you think about this? Or do you know about that? Or do you want to know about this? Or let me share something with you, right? So, when myself and my wife get together and, if we're reading a book or if we've read something or seen something, I like to share that with her and vice versa. She likes to talk to me about that or we see something. Because, again, it's that curiosity, it's that ability to communicate and to provide knowledge and to give knowledge. It's not always giving knowledge to another person, it's also receiving that knowledge from them and understanding, a certain point of view that they might have or something that they read or something that they feel or something that they want to do or try, in regards to, let's say, like a dinner place or whatever, right? Like, hey, I want to try this place. Well, why do you want to try this place? Well, I heard it had good reviews or so-and-so went to it and they said it was really good, so I really want to try it. Okay, great. Like, I hadn't heard anything about it, so sure, or vice versa, right? So being constantly curious in a relationship is important. And I think in life and in business and in, friendships, things like that, right? We're always adapting as humans. We're consuming so much. The more than any time in history, the consumption of information is abundant. It's out there. It's not always right, but it's out there, and it's very interesting on how we consume it. And so what I like to do is look at different things and be curious about different viewpoints. For instance, we had dinner the other night with our friends, and and I don't bring in politics into this, but the conversation ended up being around politics. And it was a very good conversation. It was not a heated conversation because, again, I've talked about this before. Politics and religion, unfortunately, can be extremely divisive. When someone has a different opinion than you, the first immediate thought is either go defensive or basically say, well, your opinion's wrong and mine's right, and basically you're never going to change my opinion. It was more of a good conversation in regards to certain things that I've heard, read, seen, and what they've heard, read, and seen. And just talking as a friend and couple to couple about that. And I think that was extremely important to communicate those things so they understood, why I thought certain things. And I'll say myself, because my wife kind of just, rightfully so, didn't want to be a part of that conversation just because, again, politics can be divisive. But they also got to hear my point of view on certain things and, my beliefs on things and what I've seen and what I've read. And I listened to theirs as well. And it was a good conversation. And it even got brought up a few times about that that was a good conversation. It wasn't heated. It was two different opinions having a conversation. I don't think we do that enough. But I bring that into this conversation here because, again, it's more so being constantly curious. I want to understand where they're coming from. I want to understand someone else's point of view. I can't sit here, though some of you that listen to me and know me might say jokingly, hopefully, jokingly otherwise, I can't sit here and say that I know everything and that my opinion's always right. I'm very firm in my beliefs, and I do have that type of personality, and those of you that listen to this and know me personally probably would agree 100% on that. But that's just who I am, right? And I don't sugarcoat it. Hey, this is what I believe. This is why. And I'm not going to put fluff around it and, not be able to answer questions. If I have a belief in something, I make sure that I educate myself on why I have that belief and I have the knowledge around it. And again, I'm strong in my convictions. At the same time, I want to understand why other people have those opinions and why they're strong in their convictions and have a conversation with them rather than turn those people away. I'm constantly curious because who's to say my opinion's right? Who's to say that the information that I gathered for myself is all correct, right? I think especially in this world today, we get our news from certain outlets, right? And we don't ever look at the other side of things, or we never have conversations with people that have different points of view because we're afraid or we're annoyed. And what I mean by that is we're afraid because we might not have the information that we truly think we have, and we don't want to be outsmarted. Or we're annoyed because we might get into a conversation with them and you listen to some of their thoughts and you go, they didn't educate themselves on this. This is annoying. I can't believe you actually believe this with the little that you know about the subject, right? So I think, sometimes curiosity, it doesn't die when you go from being a kid to adulthood. It should never die. You should be constantly curious through your entire life. That's my belief. Because I think if you stop educating yourself, if you stop listening to others' opinions, if you stop understanding why someone thinks a certain way, what knowledge you can gain from that, what's going on, where do you get your news, where do you get your information, what are you curious about, right? So like this past week with my oldest son, he has to read 20 minutes a day for school. He read a 120-page book on the planets, asteroids, satellites, everything, and very curious about it and talking to me about it and what he's been learning versus what we learned in school, right? So when we were in school, Pluto was a planet. It was part of the 9 planets in our solar system, and then it became a dwarf planet, or then it wasn't a planet, then it was a dwarf planet, and now he's learning newer things, and there was things in this book, I think the book's from like 2018 or 19. So it's a few years behind where we are today. But again, learning all of that stuff, and he's reading it to me and asking me questions, and I'm talking to him about the things that I know about astronomy, not everything, bringing up things out in our outer solar system about the Kuiper Belt and what we do in regards to, they call it the Goldilocks zone of what is actually a habitable planet moving forward. If if there's other planets out there that can be habitable with humans, and seeing that in the book and hearing and seeing, listen to him read and everything, I was curious as well on certain things, right? I wanted to refresh myself on it. So when he brought up like the Kuiper Belt, first thing I did after I got out of his room and he went to bed, I looked up Kuiper Belt and re-educated myself on what exactly is the Kuiper Belt, all that stuff. So again, the curiosity shouldn't end when you're a child. You should always be curious of what's going on, of what you're interested in, because there is so much information out there for you to gather that information, to gather that knowledge. I think it's extremely important. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, kind of lose that curiosity, and they just go, well, I know what it is, and, that it probably hasn't changed, so I don't want to know anymore. Or, again, knowing a lot about I keep on messing it up, a little about a lot, I think that's important, too, because it gives me, now it's like the Cliff Notes, right? It's the Cliff Notes of knowledge, but it gives me an understanding of a lot of different things, and it's a wide variety of things. I look up a lot of stuff. For instance, today, and it's little stuff, but like for instance, today, one of my favorite bands and Nolan's favorite band, the band is called Starset. They came out with a new song the other day, and I was like, man, they've released a couple new songs, but no new album. When will their new album come out? So I looked that up, and now I know. October 22nd of this year, so in a week or so, a little over a week from now, they will be releasing their new album. So that's exciting to me. But gathering that knowledge, so now I know something I can listen to in the gym, something I can put on in the car with Nolan, because none of their songs have any curse words. It's a great, if you like rock, and that's kind of funny, talking about it now. It kind of all comes together what I was just talking about. So Starset sings songs based on. Actually, you know what? Let's look them up. Google machine. But anyway, Starset's a rock band, and Nolan likes rock. But a lot of the rock bands out there, fortunately or unfortunately, just depending on your taste in music, curse a lot. Well, Starset does not curse a lot. So it is a good band that you can listen to with your kids in the car, which I think is pretty darn cool. I was going to talk to you guys. Hold on, let me scroll through here. Okay. The lead singer is, so it's Starset, it's one word. Their lead singer is, where the heck's his name? Dustin Bates. Dustin Bates informally describes the music that they create as cinematic rock. He elaborates further as to what he means by the self-prescribed label, saying it's as if a hard rock band did the soundtrack to an epic blockbuster movie. So they're blending symphonics with electronics, riff-driven, baritone guitar, hard rock. And so what the band actually does is, like, every song in the album that they create is based on more of, like, again, more astronomy, more intergalactic type stuff. So it's more of like a movie. And if you look at any of their music videos, if you even look at music videos anymore, you're not going to find on MTV, folks. MTV no longer exists as a music television channel, even though that's the name of what they are. But anyways, let's see. They have the Starset Society. I'm trying to find. Okay, Bates created the fictional backstory for the band that forms the thematic basis for their music and multimedia. In the backstory, Starset was formed as part of a public outreach initiative by the Starset Society. The Society's aims were to alert the public about the contents of the message, in quotes, the Society obtained from a mysterious signal from space. Starset treats their backstory and the Starset Society as real in interviews, with few exceptions. So they have created this type of band, again, around a message from space, and they're the messengers for it, and alerting the public on what's coming from space and all that stuff. So again, it kind of tied into I get constantly curious here, right? I looked it up, I read it. I wanted to just make sure that I had the knowledge of it. I remembered it, but I wanted to read it again to you all so you could hear what I'm talking about in regards to how it kind of tied together. One of my favorite bands, Ed Nolan's favorite bands, and then before I was talking about we're reading a book on astronomy, the planets, all that stuff. So, boom, we're bringing it back. But hey, there you go. You learned about Starset. But again, going back to what I was doing the other day, looking them up, being curious about it, learning a lot. I messed it up again. A little about a lot. There are certain subjects that I am more in tune with than others, but I do that. I do that throughout the day. I do that with my job. You know, if something comes up with my job, for instance, I support 2 large financial institutions. I'm very curious on why they make certain decisions, why they put in certain projects, what is actually driving them from a business perspective, from a technology perspective, because those are the things that I have to worry about. I make sure I read up on those things. And it isn't just those 2 financial institutions, it's the industry as a whole. I want to understand it better because if I can understand it better, I can sit in front of my client and be more educated with them, and I can become more of a trusted advisor to them because they know that I'm invested in the industry as they're invested in the industry. So it goes for work, it goes for your life, and like I mentioned again in the beginning, with your spouses, your friends, your family, asking questions and communicating is a part of that curiosity. Hey, it can be as simple as, and I mentioned it before about a dinner. Hey, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? Because I want to understand where your mind is at in regards to what you might be craving, what you're thinking. If it's not there, hey, here are some of my suggestions, right? It's communicating. Hey, the boys have baseball this weekend, and here are the times. Who wants to take who? Obviously, in my household, it's a little different because I coach Nolan's teams. So most of the time, Lindsay goes with Harrison to his games. But, you know, it's those types of things. Open communication. Talk to each other. There's a lot of times where people get in a room, they all stare at their phones. It's such an addicting thing, and I'm guilty of it as well. And sometimes it does annoy me because we just sit there in silence and we watch a TV and the TV's on. It's just background noise and we're scrolling through our phones. We're consuming information, right? So, you know, I can't sit here and bash, you say to be constantly curious, but then you don't back it up when you get pissed about those things. But at the same time, talking to each other, you can gain so much knowledge. Reading, listening to things, podcasts, for instance, this one, great source of knowledge or opinion, right? Because most of the time what I'm here on is myself, and it's my opinion on things or my conversation with you all, and you get to hear what I'm thinking, right? And when I've had guests on, asking them, you know, questions, sometimes deeper questions than others, you know, a lot of times it's more so conversation, but I'm listening and I'm learning. I think it's extremely important, and I've said it multiple times already in the last, 18, 19 minutes. Do not let that curiosity go away. Don't let yourself ever not be curious about things that interest you, things that you question, others' opinions. Why do they have those opinions? Conversations. Don't block people out. Talk to people. Educate yourself. Understand why you have certain opinions. Understand why they have certain opinions. And I think you become more of a well-rounded individual and a more, in a lot of regards, a more empathetic individual, because then you take a lot of the barriers down when you get into group settings and someone has a different opinion than yours. Because again, I see it. I was guilty of it before, where if someone had a different opinion than me, I would sit there and go, they're an idiot, they're wrong. Or it would piss me off, whatever. I've learned to not have that type of demeanor. You can be firm in your beliefs, but don't block out other beliefs or others' beliefs until you understand fully why they have that belief. And again, it can be an annoyance. If they don't have a lot of information to back that up and it's just more of a feeling, oh, I feel like I should have this opinion because I saw a thing for about 5 minutes on the news and they told me that's why I should have that opinion. Yes, that's fair. You can understand it. And now you know why they gain that opinion and you can walk away from the conversation if it's not worth your time. And then going back to kids, I mentioned earlier in the episode of, sometimes it does get frustrating that my kids ask me 1,000 questions. But you know what? It's also gratifying that they ask me 1,000 questions because they think that I know everything that they're going to ask me. And that is great. And I don't. And I tell them I don't. And when I don't, they do what kids do nowadays. Hey, Siri, what is blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to ever get to a point to where Nolan doesn't ask me questions or Harrison doesn't ask me questions and they just go to Google to find out the answers. I want them to ask me questions because that means I have a conversation with my kids and I'm helping educate them and I'm watching them absorb information and I'm watching them also tell me information. I'll tell you this right now. I'm a big Manchester United fan. I guarantee you Nolan probably knows more about our history than I do. You know why? Because he looks it up and he asks questions. You know, that's not something that constantly has been on my radar to constantly look up the history of the club and all this stuff and the players. He probably can name more players in the past than I can because he's just interested in that right now. That is something that is absorbing him. Transformers, another thing. He used to tell me everything about Transformers. You know the last time I played with a Transformer? Probably when I was 8 years old. But man, he tells me everything. Boom, boom, boom. I know this guy, and this is the guy that does this and this and this and this and this. And now he's like that with sports. And, and Harrison now is getting into that with like Transformers and cars and all that stuff. Being constantly curious, asking me questions, and educating me, and I'm educating them. And the same thing goes for my wife. And the other thing, too, is ensuring that for my wife and my family and everything else, that we're also being curious with each other and communicating and finding out more about each other. Just because I've been married 14 years does not mean that I understand everything about my wife. If that's the case, and she's listening to this, she would attest to that. If I did know everything about my wife, and I sat here and said that, she would also be listening to this and probably start laughing hysterically in her car or on her walk or wherever she listens to this podcast. But let's not pretend like we know everything about everybody, especially those that are closest to us. Ask questions, be curious, and I guarantee you it'll open your eyes in a lot of different ways. It has for me. I love the fact that I'm constantly gaining knowledge and that whether I'm gaining knowledge or I'm helping give knowledge of stuff that I know about, I think that's fantastic because, again, it's around communication. So I talk about this in regards to, I'm calling this episode Constantly Curious, but it almost just goes back to communication, right? Let's go back to the conversation I had with my friends at dinner that have a different view politically and in other aspects of what's going on in the world right now. We could have easily sat there and stared each other in the face and pointed fingers and said, "You're wrong. I know you believe this, and you're wrong because you believe it, and I know I believe this, and I'm right because I believe it, so let's argue about it." Instead, open your eyes a little bit, ask questions, listen, tell your side, and hopefully that you get that same reciprocation from them as well, that they listen back to you, and hopefully it opens their eyes as well. It's a very freeing thing to be constantly curious and to communicate with people. And that's what today's episode is about, being constantly curious. I think it's a extremely important thing to always educate yourself, communicate, learn, don't put up walls. And I think if you do that, your life will be more fulfilling in all aspects, whether you're married, boyfriend, girlfriend, with your family, brothers and sisters, with your friends, with your kids, with your coworkers. Be constantly curious, understand where other people are coming from, educate yourself, learn, get a well-rounded view, right? If you look at it in regards to politics or religion, bring that up, again, divisiveness. find out why the one side, and I have to say the one side, unfortunately, because in this country you have to either be one way or the other, and that's very unfortunate, because I guarantee you if I got most of you in a room and we talked about the things that a decent human believes, we probably have all very similar beliefs, which puts us right in the middle. But in this country, you can't be in the middle right now, and that's an unfortunate thing. And that's why I said I don't like talking politics, because it's just unfortunate. But get a well-rounded view. Understand why the one side believes in something versus what you might believe in. See some of their points. They can't always be wrong. It can't always be one side's right, one side's wrong. That's impossible. There are good points on both sides of the aisle. You just have to be able to be willing to open your eyes, to listen, and to learn. Be constantly curious in your life. Again, it applies with everything. Family, friends, marriage, parenthood, yourself, you as an individual. Learn more about yourself. Learn about why you might feel a certain way. Read, talk to people, communicate, watch, listen. Be constantly curious. That's my message today. I hope it was a good one. As always, like, share, give me a review. I just appreciate everyone that listens to this podcast. This is Ryan DeFaber, 2 cents worth. I'm out of here.